Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the virtual June meeting for the Green Local School District Board of Education. Mrs. Snowberger, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Campbell,
Here.
Mrs. Stoynoff,
Here.
Okay.
Mrs.
Welcome,
Finelli,
everyone, to the
Here.
Mr.
virtual
Cohen,
June meeting for the Green Local School District Board of
Mute
Education.
yourself. Here.
Mrs.
There we go.
Mr. Cohen,
Here.
Mr. Chinaki.
Here. All right, we'll move on with the approval of the agenda. We do have an addendum item, which is for executive session this evening under personnel. Ohio Revised Code would be 121 dash something, I think, but well, it is for personnel, and we know that one exists. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda with the addendum items included?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stoynoff, and a second,
Second.
Mr. Cohen or Mrs. Spinelli. Thank you very much. Mrs. Snowberger.
Mrs. Stoynoff,
Yes.
Mrs. Finelli,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We have no need for executive session at this time. No visitors popping up on our screen, I don't think. So we will move on with the approval of the minutes for the regular board minutes, regular board meeting of May 18th and the record retention meeting of June 4th. Do I have a motion to approve both of those?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Finelli. And a second?
Second.
Mr. Chinaki, thank you. Mrs. Snowberger?
Mrs. Finelli,
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mrs. Stoynoff.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item 6 for the financial report. The superintendent and treasurer recommend the Board of Education approve the financial statement and payment of bills from May 2020. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stoynoff. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Mrs. Stoneberger?
Mrs. Stoynoff,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki,
Yes.
Mrs. Finelli.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item B, the superintendent and treasurer recommend the Board of Education approve the transfer of $85,841.98 from the general fund to the food service fund 006 to cover the fiscal year 20 negative balance. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Stoynoff. Edie or Jeff, you guys want to just mention this one? Just because it's unusual to have that transfer into that fund, I think.
It is. Typically, the food service, like most any other fund besides the general fund and the PI fund, funds are supposed to basically get as close to zero as possible. You know, you don't want to make a profit off the food service, but you also need to be self-sustaining. But with the pandemic, obviously, we lost nearly 2.5 months worth of revenue. But we also still had employees to pay and benefits to pay out as well. We did purchase a big deal of food for the food service that went out to families through the drive up pickup line, but we also didn't get any revenue for that. We did receive about 20,000 so far from the state to help us cover for those funds, and there could be more coming. But per law, you can't have any fund in the negative. So unfortunately, this was where we're at with the negative for the end of the fiscal year. There are school districts that have this transfer every year. So I'm pretty thankful that this is actually the first time I've seen it here for the food service. But food service typically runs really close to the end of having just enough to break even. So it wasn't surprising to me that this was going to happen for it.
Right. And we don't typically bankroll anything into there. I mean, that's kind of we want it to be like, 0-0 at the end. And I assume we were pretty much on track up through the middle of March, up through the pandemic beginning, that we were going to, it was going to be the same as ever, same year.
We were, yeah, we were. And if it, we did a great deal of rentals that we did pass out over those 2.5 months as well as paying our employees per their contract. So the two things together created this.
Okay. All right, thanks. Any other questions? No? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mrs. Stoynoff,
Yes.
Mrs. Finelli,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes?
Mr. Chinaki.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item C, the superintendent treasurer recommend the approval of the CARES Act funding, the amount of $378,000.90, and the creation of Fund 507 for this purpose. Per federal regulations, items purchased March 13th, 2020 and after that meet the approved CARES grant application are allowable expenses and may be recorded as such. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Finelli. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chinaki. Mrs. Snowberry, do you want to add anything to that, or anybody want to add anything to that, or are we good? That's pretty cool.
We did have our application approved last week. It is federal dollars, but it's run through Ohio Department of Education, similar to our other grant funds that we have. We do have a contract with the ESC Consortium for state pricing that the district will receive masks and replenish of Purell every month for the next 12 months. And we also purchased upfront about $25,000 worth of Purell sanitizer, really is what I should call it, from Damon. And that was able to be recoded back into that CARES and not out of the general fund that we were normally going to take it from. So other than that, we did move some salaries into this fund that are allowable, crisis management type of a counselor, student wellness funds, the new student wellness job is allowable out of this fund as well. And the rest of the dollars are for the Canvas that you guys are going to see later on in the agenda, and one-to-one equipment for the younger grades in case, and as we see it's happening, if we need to do remote learning again, it was for Mr. Clandaniel and his department to be able to purchase the rest of those one-to-one devices.
Okay,
So
thank you.
it went pretty fast, I'll give you that.
Well, I'm glad we kind of got on the ordering train for the PPE and that kind of stuff so that we don't run into that same logjam that we did
Yes,
back in the spring. So
everything is purchased already, so.
Yeah.
And then there's a little bit of money set aside for PD for the new Canvas
Okay.
software,
Gotcha.
whatever it is, yeah. You know, I can't think of the right word right now.
Learning management system.
That's it, right? I couldn't think of the word.
All right, you call the roll, please.
Mrs. Finelli,
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mrs. Stornoff. Motion carries
Yes.
5-0. I saw your lips move. I didn't realize I didn't hear it. Sorry.
Item D, the superintendent treasurer recommend the approval of the fiscal year 20 final appropriations in the amount of $54,067.80, and the final estimated resources in the amount of $65,768,462.23. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stoynoff. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Mrs. Snowberger.
This is what is due to the county by tomorrow, and it's basically just firming up the final budgets and also the final revenue for the district. I know the number seems really quite different between the two, but if you recall, you know, nearly $12 million of that revenue was unencumbered from last fiscal year that we didn't use. So it's a nice indicator that we're still getting really close to not spending a horrible amount over what we're bringing in. So that's kind of a nice, if you take what you had before and add it to your revenue, it should be pretty close, you know, to what you're going to spend. If those two numbers are really close together, or the opposite, you know, that's when you've got some problems. So this will all be turned in tomorrow to the county along with the next item. And it's just the way to finish up the budget for the fiscal year for tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Stoynoff,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki,
Yes.
Mrs. Finelli.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item E, the superintendent and treasurer recommend the approval of the fiscal year 21 temporary appropriations as presented by the treasurer in the amount of $13,500,016.95. I have a motion to approve that.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Spinelli. And a second,
Second.
Mr. Chinaki. Thank you, Mrs. Snowberger.
This amount is exactly 25% of the number in letter D. Final appropriations for each fiscal year are due in September. In order to spend any money with the liabilities and the contracts and employees, you have to file for temporary appropriation approval first from you and then by tomorrow with the county. Once that's approved, this is the amount of money I could spend up until September 1st, when the budgets are, or the end of September, when the budgets are given to you, for the final appropriations. Final appropriations are due to the county by October 1st, which is why you always see that first big permanent appropriations resolution in September each year.
Okay. Any questions? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Spinelli,
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mrs. Stoynoff,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item F, the superintendent and treasurer recommend approval of the instructure contract, Canvas K through 12, in the amount of $47,912 to be paid from the CARES grant from Fund 507, effective May 28th, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Stoynoff. The Canvas is just kind of takes over our Google Meet, right? Or Google Classroom, is that right?
Yeah, so as Edie stated earlier, looking at the CARES Act grant, one of the things that we know we're going to need to improve upon is our remote learning. So having a learning management system gives us the ability to do a lot more. We'll still be able to use a lot of the components of Google, but this will replace and be more robust than Google Classroom.
And can I just add that I think this is something we're doing for a specific reason, but I also think it's a good move because the one thing that hasn't caught on at the college university level is Google Classroom. We use at the university what we call Brightspace. It's a D2L product, which I think Canvas is, or maybe Canvas is Blackboard. They're all kind of related. And so I think this will really give our students an advantage that transition to a new learning management system when they get to the college level won't be as steep for them because Google Classroom is very different from the learning management systems that typically are used on university campuses. So it'll have that positive benefit too.
Excellent. Mrs. Snowberger.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mrs. Stoynoff,
Sorry, yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki,
Yes.
Mrs. Finelli.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item G, a resolution determining to submit to the electors of the school district the question of the renewal of an existing tax levy pursuant to the sections 5705.194 to 5705.197 of the revised code. I know you'd like for me all to read this, but it will be posted on our website and you can read through there. It's basically a renewal of our emergency levy of $4.8 million. And that was first passed in March of 2016, I believe. No, I'm sorry.
The last time.
It was
It was
renewed in 2016. Last time, sorry about that.
Yeah.
So it's still for the $4.8 million. This is the first reading. It's no new taxes. We pushed terms out to 10 years just to kind of ease the burden of levy fatigue on the ballot and also to save money that each time it comes onto the ballot, it costs the district. So again, not going to change any of the amounts that people see for the $4.8 million. It's just stretching it from 5 to 10 years. This is the first reading. You can expect the second reading in July, and you can expect to see this on the ballot in November.
And again, that's no new money, correct?
That is correct. No additional taxes, no new money, right? So with all that being said, do I have a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Finelli.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stoynoff. Any other questions or comments?
I just like to always say when these come up is the phrasing is often confusing because it uses the word emergency in there, which is a term put on those levy renewals by the state. It doesn't signify that the district is in an emergency. It's just simply a term that's used in the levy language.
Right. And I'm sure there will be multiple clarifications of that, because I'm like same way. It's like, "What, are you guys okay?" And it's like, yeah, it's just the way they state it. So
It's really something that the state really needs to change, because I think it is very deceptive to the voters. When you see that, you would obviously think it's an emergency. That's the term we use when something's really wrong. So it is something I wish that the state legislature would look at and change.
we'll just hope for that one. Mrs. Snowberger.
Mrs. Finelli,
Yes.
Mrs. Stoynoff,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item H, the superintendent and treasurer recommend the approval of a donation of classroom literacy resources with a value of $597.98 from DonorsChoose.org in support of the second grade classroom of Mrs. Courtney Denny. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Second.
Second.
Mr. Chinaki, thank you. Mrs. Snowberger, or any comments?
I'd just like to thank Courtney and as well as our other staff that go above and beyond looking for resources beyond tax dollars to provide for our kids great learning opportunities. So just appreciate what Courtney did, and obviously DonorsChoose.org for coming through.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mrs. Snowberger.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mrs. Stoynoff,
Yes.
Mrs. Finelli.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item I, the superintendent and treasurer recommend the approval of a donation in the amount of $3,117 from Riley Homes, LLC / Jonathan Riley in support of the Student Services Department. I have a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Chinaki. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Stoynoff. Jeff, any comments on this one?
No, just obviously we appreciate that he's giving back to the district and our student services. And, I know that he wanted to meet as soon as he moved in the area and wanted to partner with the schools. So, obviously we appreciate Jonathan and Riley Homes, and that money will be put to good use. I'm sure that Joya Mitchell, our director of student services, is excited about that.
For sure. Definitely a generous donation, no doubt. Mrs. Snowberger?
Mr. Chinaki,
Yes.
Mrs. Stoynoff,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mrs. Finelli.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Under new business, the consent calendar note. As always, items under the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted under one motion. There'll be no separate discussion of these items prior to the time the board votes, unless a board member requests an item be clarified or even removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Finelli.
Second.
And thank you, Mr. Cohen, for the second. Questions or comments?
I just wanted to thank Barb Holmes and Helen Poston for all their years of service to Green Local Schools. They were both in our food service department, and both of them always had smiles, and I know they touched a lot of different students' lives over the course of the years, so we wish them well, and just very grateful for all the time that Barb and Helen put into the district.
And I'd probably like just to mention, I appreciate we have a couple of people that are changing positions and moving around, and kind of in support of our drive to make sure we're using all of the grant money and federal dollars as efficiently as possible, and taking out and putting back in whenever we can in order to save a few of our general fund dollars. So. I know change never comes easily, but I certainly appreciate those people that are, stepping up and willing to kind of be flexible and working with us on this changing landscape. So, Mrs. Snowberger, if you'd call the roll.
Mrs. Spinelli,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki,
Yes.
Mrs. Stoyanov.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item B, the superintendent and treasurer recommend the Board of Education approve the following resolution. Is that whereas, in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 3313.90 and House Bill 487, the Green Local School District declares its intent not to provide career technical education to students enrolled in grades 7 or 8 for the 2020-21 school year. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stoyanov. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chinaki. This is pretty much the standard thing. I know we're working with PLCC, but this is probably this year of unknown is probably not the best year to throw in another variable. so we'll continue to move that along. Mrs. Stover.
Mrs. Stoyanov,
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mrs. Spinelli.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. The superintendent and treasurer recommend the Board of Education approve the advanced placement psychology curriculum purchased from Bedford, Freeman, and Worth High School publishers. The amount not to exceed $20,000 paid from the Permanent Improvement Fund 003. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Spinelli. Any questions or comments?
Just Mrs. Brown and her staff at the high school. This is a great opportunity to add another AP course offering for our students. So AP Psych is something that I'm sure will continue to grow as time moves on, and we're looking forward to starting it this coming school year.
Absolutely. Mrs. Snowberger.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mrs. Spinelli,
Yes.
Mrs. Stoyanov,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item D, the superintendent and treasurer recommend the Board of Education approve the solicitation of bids for demolition of the South Bus Garage. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stoyanov. And a second?
Second.
Mr. Chinaki, thank you. Questions or comments? Mrs. Spinelli, I'm sure, is probably a little bit more familiar with the bus garage than some. You'd probably recommend that this probably should have been done a while ago.
A long time ago. Yeah. I'm very happy.
Do you have any idea what year it was built, Jeff?
That I do not know.
It has to be 50s, maybe.
18, oh no.
I mean, because it was in rough shape in 1980 something. I'm not going to get specific, but 80 something. When I was there as a student at Kleckner, so this is well past its time.
Yeah,
Right.
they've done a great job keeping it on life support, but like everything else, I think I think when there was more rain coming through the building than when there was actually falling from the sky, it was time to go. So,
And the buses don't fit it in anymore. So.
yeah,
Yes.
no reason to have a garage if it doesn't fit, right? Mrs. Stober.
Mrs. Stoyanov,
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mrs. Spinelli,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item E, the superintendent and treasurer recommend the Board of Education approve the negotiated agreement between OPSI and the Green Local Schools Board of Education for the period July 1, 2020 through June 30th of 2022. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Spinelli.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Questions or comments?
I just wanted to thank our OPSI, which is made up of our custodial and food service staff, for collaborating with us and coming up with an agreement that both sides considered fair. And obviously, custodial and food service is going to be a very important part of this coming school year for certain. So we just appreciate them and are grateful for, like I said, the collaboration through this process.
Very well. Mrs. Snowberger.
Mrs. Spinelli,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mrs. Stoyanov,
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. The recognition of visitors and public participation. We did not have any emails for the public participation uh, portion tonight. So board accommodations. How about we'll start with Mr. Chinaki.
We
We
Yeah.
lost Sally.
we lost
Spinelli
Mrs. Spinelli.
has decided that she's going to take a little break.
There she is.
All right.
Yeah,
It's done.
yeah, so, just, really appreciate everyone's support and just what this school year meant, and just me personally speaking, serving on this board for these past 6 months. It's been quite an experience, and just thankful for everyone that's reached out and talked with me, and just helped me along, get through as we head into the summer months, which we know are going to be very exciting times. Definitely want to give a shout out to, on another note, the Rotary Club of Green, and also the Toastmasters, who gave 1,000 cans of vegetables to Blessings in a Backpack a few weeks ago. I saw that on Facebook and thought that was really, really neat. Just a beautiful example of our community partners coming together to serve others in such a vulnerable time right now for so many in the community. So again, just looking forward to hitting the ground running this summer and getting ready for the upcoming school year, whatever that looks like. Just looking forward to rolling up the sleeves with with everybody involved, and appreciate everyone's time and willingness to help me out. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chinaki. Mrs. Spinelli?
Well, I went to Virgil Klein's retirement luncheon today, and I just want to say good luck to Virg, and he will be sorely missed. Also, I wanted to welcome Erin Volk to Green Middle School as intervention specialist. She was a neighbor, and she's no longer in the neighborhood, but but I'm glad she's going to be in Green Schools. She's a great lady. And that's all I have today.
All right, Mr. Cohen.
Yeah, I just want to thank Mr. Miller and Mrs. Snowberger for dealing with the CARES Act applications and all that, and thinking outside the box and trying to make this moving jigsaw puzzle work. And I know it's not it's not an easy job at all. And the most frustrating part of it is, you're doing it with a lack of information, and as we all know, we're still waiting on the states to provide their guidelines and to see kind of what the fall is going to look like. And I know people in the community are anxious to know what the plan is, but I just urge everybody to be patient, because as we know, the news changes every day. And so I know you all are doing your best, and the administrative team is doing its best to try and figure out the best possible plan for the district. So I wanted to thank you for your efforts there. And I also wanted to urge everybody out in the community, when you are out, especially in an enclosed space, wear your mask. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Mrs.
Well, Mr. Cohen stole most of my thunder, I guess, but I want to thank Cindy Brown and all those at the high school that were involved in putting together the graduation ceremony that happened for our seniors. It was great to be able to watch it live, and I thank Mr. Campbell for being there to represent the board. It was really wonderful, and we got a lot of positive feedback. People are saying, why can't we Facebook Live every graduation ceremony? And it was so neat. And I think it was really neat. It was not certainly the ceremony that everyone intended, but the nice thing about it was even more members of the community were able to see the ceremony because it was on Facebook Live. And it is difficult as this job can be, and the job of the administration and the job of teaching itself. The moment that matters most is every year when those students cross the stage. And so I was happy to see in these times when joy is sometimes hard to find, that we were able to broadcast that. Thank you to everyone that had a hand in that. As Mr. Cohen said, we're waiting on the state to issue guidelines for what school may look like. We're also waiting for them to issue budgetary guidelines, all of those kind of things. So we're definitely in a holding pattern. I know it's creating a lot of anxiety out in the community. I understand. I have a senior this year, and he is my one and only, so I don't get a do-over. Whatever the school year is going to be his senior year. So I understand the anxiety. Know that we are not ignoring the request to know what school is going to look like, but at this point, without any guidelines, we can make plans, but we can't make concrete plans until we have those guidelines. And so we will work as hard as we can once we have them to make sure that everybody knows what everything is going to look like and that we provide the opportunity for the safest education for our students, because that's what really matters. And thank you to Mr. Miller and Mr. Snowberger and all the rest of the administration and others who are have been working so hard in what has been an incredibly stressful end to a school year and an incredibly stressful summer, which is supposed to be a time where we can all take a breath, and that isn't happening. So thank you for all of your hard work. Other than that, do try to enjoy a little bit of the summer, and we'll see you in July.
Thank you, Mrs. Stoyanov. And I'd like to echo the same thing about the graduation. You know, Mrs. Brown did. I will be the first one to admit that I was skeptical of the timeline, but it was amazing how it went through, and I've heard nothing but unbelievably positive comments. I think it was, you know, nobody got the shush or the you know, the dirty look from the people sitting next to them when they cheered because they could beat their horn and do all that kind of stuff right in front of the stage, and everybody got a you know, a picture of their son or daughter right there in the front. So I'd like to also extend our gratitude to Kempthorne Auto Group for providing the stage. Wow, what a fantastic resource, and what a great community member that they've become already, even though their facility is only under construction. You know, I think they talk about during times of crisis is when leadership really is important, and when real leaders emerge. And I think that we've seen the two people that lead this district, the superintendent and treasurer, rise above, I would think, just about everybody else around in the whole entire area. And they've led this district. It hasn't been easy, but sometimes, well, most of the time, leadership is not. And it's one of those things where you continue to be guided by doing the right thing for our kids and for our community and for our staff. And I just certainly commend you both for doing that, and take great pride in the fact that you allow the five of us to be part of this, and we owe you a huge debt of gratitude for bringing us to this point, and knowing that your leadership will see us through the chaos and everything else that I want to say is going to ensue, but I think that we're in the midst of. So you know, we already see that it was promised for guidance for tomorrow. Oh, I meant Thursday. Kind of like one of those things, you know, like, you know, free tacos tomorrow. Well, tomorrow sometimes it never comes, but it'll have to come sometime. And Mrs. Stoyanov, you're right. We all receive, I think, a number of emails with people giving their opinion in terms of what they think should happen, why it's good or bad to do this or that, and we appreciate all of them. And you know, we're holding fast to doing what kind of our tagline is, that we talk about what we know, and we don't try to speculate about what's going to happen. And as soon as we know, as soon as we have plans, we'll certainly be putting those out to the public, with the idea, of course, always with the asterisk, just like it almost sounds like the 5-year forecast. It's only a forecast, so it could change. So you know, working in those treasurer terms all the time.
There you go.
And like always, like you see, you know, like Mr. Cohen said, and everybody else probably is thinking, it's like, you know, when you're outside, do the right thing, wear your mask, and, you know, just we're all going to get through this, and so let's all get through it together in the best way possible. So we do have a need for executive session this evening, like I mentioned earlier. We do not anticipate any action to be taken afterwards. So do I have a motion to move into executive session at this time?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stoyanov.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Spinelli. Mrs. Snowberger?
Mrs. Stoyanov,
Yes.
Mrs. Spinelli,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Motion